Well, Jenny Sue is back again to share some excruciating vulnerabilities and horrors of her life that are really too much for anyone. How can we not listen if she had to actually live it? This is not so that we can feel depressed and overwhelmed, though you may feel some of that for a time. But she will also share the amazing victories she has had. You really want to hold on and not miss this. So thank you, Jenny Sue, for joining us today. I am so honored and blessed to know you. And I am so thankful for you being here today with us.
I appreciate the opportunity to raise awareness. One, about exploitation and the trauma that's happening all around us, but even more so about how I believe Jesus shows up to redeem the
Mm,
worst of the worst pain. So thank you
yes.
for inviting me to this conversation. I'm encouraged to see where it will lead.
Thank you so much. I want to also just read a little section of Isaiah 61 because I think it fits so well that the Spirit of the Lord will comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve. And he will bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And they will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. And I just have to say, Jenny Sue, I believe you are a display of his splendor. So thank you again.
I appreciate that. It is, as people engage with my story, I hope that that is what they will find, that it has always been Jesus. Like he's
Mm,
the author and perfecter. He's the one that shows up. And uh, by God's grace, and I'm so deeply grateful, he's not afraid of the dark, which is where
yeah.
I am again and again.
Yes, and now by choice. We will show you at the end, the details will be in the notes of her book, The Lucky One, where she does really tell more details of her story and how Jesus showed up and walked her through some of these situations she will talk about today. And that's, again, how I learned of Jenny Sue's story. And so, Jenny Sue, we're going to dive in. um, tell us that first time of that excruciating suffering that's unbearable and too much for anyone. Can you tell us a little bit about that what you share in your book, The Lucky One?
Yeah, I was sold into the sex trade by my grandfather when I was 4 years old. And it was a day that was, I thought, a normal summer day. I had spent the day at the train station with my grandfather, playing and being spoiled rotten by everyone that worked there, and spent a significant amount of time with one man in particular who had a responsibility for moving the train cars back and forth in the train yard, kind of like a giant number slidey puzzle. And I loved it. I sat on his lap and blew the whistle, and we moved train cars. And late afternoon came, and I was maybe tired and grumpy as 4 year olds might be, and left with my grandfather, assuming that we would be going home. And instead, we met that man, that engineer, in an open field nearby where he and my grandfather struck a deal, and then he came to take what he had paid for. And in a matter of moments, my life turned upside down and inside out. And I think one of the remarkable things about trauma and God's grace, it's okay if people don't believe in God. They don't understand or have any desire to believe in God. But the way our brain is designed, when trauma is so severe, it allows the logical functioning part of our brain, the thinking part of our brain, to shut down, to go offline. And we drop into something that's called fight, flight, or freeze. And whether you are a Christ follower or not, the science of neuroscience indicates that, right? Well, the remarkable thing is all these body systems kick in with pain relief and with amnesia, essentially anesthetizing the person being traumatized. And so the unthinkable happened. And by God's grace, I physically don't have memory of the sensation of that. My gut and my soul bears the scars of that. But after the transaction was complete and the rape was finished, my grandfather wrapped me in a blanket and put me in the backseat of the car to take me home. And he had this really perverse love of old gospel music. So he put in a cassette tape playing How Great Thou Art. And over the years of my trauma and abuse, these crimes committed against me, he would play that song either during the assault or immediately after. And it was his way of assuring that I would never find freedom, that I would never find healing or redemption. But I believe God works everything together for our good and his glory. And so, as much as that song still triggers me today, like if I go to church, I went to church just a few weeks ago, and during the worship, they played that song, and I have an immediate visceral reaction. It kicks me in the gut. I often have to leave the church. Occasionally, I throw my head back and curse at hearing this song because it's so deeply connected to the trauma for me. But that very first day, as that song was playing and we were driving home, there was a sunset that still to this day is the most remarkable sunset I've ever seen. The sky was just on fire with color of purple and crimson and orange, and it was just aflame with color. And in my memory, if I transport myself back to the back seat of the car, as real as the interior of the car, as real as the music playing, as real as seeing the back of my grandfather's head, I have this sensation of Jesus holding me on his lap with both arms wrapped around me. And he's not put off by the tears or the blood or the shame. And he just leans in and whispers, I've got you, baby, and I'm not going to let you go. I'm big enough. I've got you. I'm not going to let you go. And he didn't. And if Jesus can show up in that place, where can his grace and his mercy and his love not reach? If at that point there was no human help, my grandfather wasn't going to help. Sometime later, I think my grandmother was aware of the abuse and became complicit in it. And she was no help. At certain points of my journey, teachers and doctors were on some level aware of what was happening, and they were no help. I didn't have any resources to escape when the trafficking was happening within my family unit. I mean, my grandfather was selling me outside to other men, but I lived at home. And in the midst of that profound hopelessness, Jesus showed up, and he showed up again and again and again in this really dynamic way. So by the time I was in kindergarten, only 5 years old, every night I was praying, not the traditional little kid prayer, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. I was praying fervently, desperately, Jesus, just let me go to heaven. Please don't make me wake up again. And that was my 5-year-old idea of escape. Clinically, you would call it suicidal ideation. At 5, it was just get me out of here. And I knew Jesus enough at that point to believe that he would show up and that he would get me out of here. Unfortunately, his plan took much longer than I would have hoped. So my exploitation continued for 13 years. And I finally found freedom by his grace the day after a real failed suicide attempt at the age of 17.
Hmm. I, I want to pause there because I'm sure everyone who is listening to this is a little overwhelmed
Mm-hmm.
because this isn't something they normally hear. But I also want to point out that unfortunately, this happens very regularly within families, without families. This is what is happening in our world, in the United States, in every country, everywhere there is people
Mm. Yeah.
abusing children, adults, using them for their purposes, whether it's just for themselves or even extending it for the pleasure of others and then gaining profit over it. All of it, it's too much, but it is very real.
Right.
And you are such a young girl, and so of course, we can think as adults, well, of course she believes in Jesus, or she believes that God's there because she's a little child, and we believe whatever. We're gullible, and also you were desperate.
Right.
But 13 years. So
Right.
13 years of this hell, you were surviving,
Mm-hmm.
finding escapes here and there, but really just surviving, because you did go to school, you had parents, and you moved around, but yet somehow this continued to happen. And as you said, no one was there rescuing you, helping you, and stopping it.
Right.
And God did not stop it, though
Yeah.
you cried out
That's
regularly.
fun, right?
So you're older, you're getting to this point. So you said Jesus met you multiple times
Mm-hmm.
in different excruciating, and these I assume were all at very severe, excruciating periods, is where he
Yeah.
physically met with you.
Yeah.
I have heard other stories and met with other people that is the case. Again, he wants to use us to go, to help, to be a resource, to see the hurting and the broken. He calls us to do that as humans.
Right.
But sometimes we are too slow. Sometimes we're not paying attention. Sometimes we're like, hey, that's over there. Someone else has got that. And this is what he does.
Right.
His plan is to use us, but if we are not there, he will keep going. He will keep reaching out to you. He will make himself known to you if you call out to him. If you need him, he will show up. I have heard it over and over again. I'm always in awe of that.
Yeah.
I'm always thankful for that. But even as I read your story, I was obviously very angry, very troubled
Mm.
that he didn't stop it sooner. And it's
Yeah.
hard for us to understand because we are not God. We
Right.
cannot see the whole picture. We don't know all the other pieces. We just see us. We just
Right.
see the hurt and rescue us.
Right.
Sometimes we wish God would be that genie in a bottle, right? I mean,
Right.
ideally, we do because of our, especially in America, we are
Right.
trained for quick fixes, pills, drugs. What do we do to fix it? What do we do to make it go away? So, of
Right.
course, we want that from our God as well. Jesus, save me, rescue me. And it is really hard to understand why he doesn't, why
Yes.
he doesn't heal everyone, why he doesn't rescue everyone. There is so much to understand about our God. He is the creator of each of us, he is the creator of everything in this world. But there is also
Yeah.
an enemy that he has given some reign to, some free reign for a period of time for his reasons,
Hmm.
because he wants us to choose him. He doesn't want to be a genie in the bottle. He wants us to see him for his love, his justice. There is justice, for
Yeah.
his mercy, and oh, is there mercy, and oh, is there grace, as you keep referring to. It is beyond our complete understanding, but there
Right.
is a lot we can learn and understand through his Bible, the word
Right.
that he has given us to understand him, how he works, what he does. So the Bible is the ultimate resource in learning and understanding who this God is and why he allows certain things. So for you in this journey,
Hmm.
crying out, in this journey of surviving, trying to commit suicide, yet God keeps showing up and showing himself to you. Reading your story, when you talk about him holding your head, I'm in awe and I am angry. I am stirred up. Um, a whole a huge amount of things go through my mind.
All the feeling.
Yes. And then even in my time with God and me asking him for more understanding, to understand him in his ways, because I don't always like his ways. His
Hmm.
ways sometimes are way too slow for me. I get, even in my own life, I'm very impatient. And of course, I would like things done sooner. I don't like suffering. Who likes suffering? But yet he talks about in his word, the Bible, that we will suffer. We will suffer even when we walk in obedience, even as a child, an innocent child, being abused and shattered and broken in every way. He is still a God of justice. It's
Hmm.
not always how we see it or how we think it should be done or in our time, as your story and so many others show. But he kept showing himself to you. And for that, you kept crying out for him, as I said before, as you said. So, how? How? I mean, you've talked about his
Yeah.
grace, but can you go into more detail of how can you see him as a loving God? How can you see him as a God of justice
Yeah.
when you yourself waited through this unjust, unchosen in any way suffering
Hmm.
and shattering of your very being? How did you wrap your head around that? How did you walk out that journey of understanding this God and seeing him as a God of justice and love and grace?
Yeah, that is the question, right? I mean, that is the question for all of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Is God all good or is he all powerful?
Mm-hmm.
Can he be both? How can a loving God allow this to happen? And whatever this is for every individual,
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
could God let my mom get cancer? How could God let my child disappear? How could God let my husband betray me? How could God let
Right.
everybody has their own wrestling with the sovereignty and the goodness
Yes.
of God. And it is not only a good question, it I think is the most foundational question. And I have spent a lot of time, especially early in recovery, mad at God, mad, stomping, furious, mad.
Mhm.
I thought especially after this really profound and ultimate betrayal that happened when I was 15. You made reference to it,
Mhm.
that Jesus showed up, but at one point in that trauma, Jesus showed up and he had his hands on either side of my head, and his tears were dripping down on my face. And he was telling me, "Look at me. I'm right here. Look at me. I'm here." And at one point, he throws his head back and roars, saying, "Father, how will she ever understand?" And I didn't.
Mhm.
I didn't. I was absolutely devastated. He showed up, and in my mind, and for years, like, so what? So he showed up. Like, he didn't stop it, right? And I was so mad. I hope somebody doesn't just take this clip, but I was so mad that I felt so betrayed. I thought, if God is all good and all loving, the very least he could do is let me die.
Right.
Like, by then at 15, I had been praying for death for 10 years.
Mhm.
Like, that's the least he could do, is just let me die. And over the years of journey and therapy and time with Jesus, all of it collectively, I've grown, I've come to understand different things. But one of the things that still just really irritates me, and I know people mean well, and I myself have been the one to speak these words, like, God uses everything for his glory. He's going to redeem it, right?
Mhm.
As if he's trying to pick up the broken pieces, or even worse yet, this was his plan so he could show his glory,
Mm.
right? And that's a really perverse underlying theme in
Mhm.
a lot of Christian culture. And in years past, I've thought those things, I've said those things, I've wondered and wrestled with those things, like, I'm waiting for him to redeem it, to pick up the broken pieces and patch it together and make something good out of it, right? And how do you do that in the midst of the anger and the betrayal and the shame? And here's what I think about that. In the beginning, in the garden, God made everything and everything was good. And he made man, and man was good. Can you believe that? Man was good. And he made man and man and woman were naked and unashamed, and it was good. And everything was good. And then Satan shows up. And in the imagery depicted in Genesis and carries through scripture, Satan is often depicted as a serpent, right? And a serpent eats eggs. It consumes life before life has the opportunity to take root, to spring to life. That's what a serpent does. It eats eggs. It
Mm.
uh, it consumes life before life comes into being. So what if God isn't on the defense? What if he isn't trying to patch together all the broken places, running around with his spackle and tools and, like, glue, trying to tape everything back together that Satan keeps wrecking? What if instead of that, before the creation of the world, he called you, Krista. He called me, Jenny Sue. He called your listeners by name before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us to be adopted as his own. He made us masterpieces, works of art, and he prepared good works in advance for us to do.
Mhm.
So what if from eternity past, God said, nope, Jenny Sue, that one, she's mine. She's going to be, I'm going to make her, I certainly am not in my flesh, I'm going to make her holy and blameless. And
Mhm.
you know what? Beyond that, she's going to fight human trafficking and exploitation, that was his plan from eternity past. And then Satan shows up and goes, oh yeah, I bet I can take the life before it comes to root, before it springs to life.
Mhm.
And like this really bizarre story with Job, Satan shows up before the throne and God says, where have you been? And he says, roaming around the earth. And God says, have you seen my boy Job? He's righteous. You can't shake that one. And Satan goes, oh, watch me. But it's really God's commendation, his love, his praise of Job. He's like, nope, this boy, Job, he's mine. You can't shake him. And Satan threw everything he could to try to subvert God's plan in Job's life. And Job came through it. And so rather than this horrible thing happened and God's going to use it to make me into someone that fights human trafficking. No, 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 no. The plan from eternity past was that I would be right here with you today, and you and I today would be raising awareness. We would be fighting exploitation. And the enemy threw everything in his toolbox at me from the age 4 to 17 to make sure that we couldn't have this conversation.
Yes.
And God, sitting on his throne, goes, nope, watch Jenny Sue. You can't shake that one. She's going to come through it. It's not that he's trying to patch it together.
No.
He had faith all along. Like you made reference to, it seems like he took a long time. It was a long time coming, right?
Mhm.
Rescue did not come as I wanted it to.
Mhm.
But one of my favorite verses, and I can't remember the reference point, you might put it in the notes later, but in Psalms it says, my soul has escaped from the fowler's snare. And while my body didn't, I still bear scars. I
Mhm.
have some profound internal scars. God blessed me with 17 pregnancies and I lost 14 before birth. I have the 3 glorious, amazing live children that I've got to see grow to adulthood, and 14 waiting for me in glory. So I have physical scars. My physical body did not escape, but Jesus in the flesh showing up, that's what he says. He says, I'll never leave her or forsake her. The promise isn't that we aren't going to suffer.
Right.
We are.
Yep.
And even when you have, ultimate suffering. I have a dear friend whose mom died of cancer, and she wrestled. She was so angry that God let her mom die. And the reality is 10 out of 10 people die.
Mhm.
Like all of humanity. 10 out of 10, except for Enoch. He got swept into glory. The verses he is walking with God. He was then, he is now. It's perfect present tense. It's an ongoing action. But even Jesus, like all humanity, dies. Another thing you said though was, why does he allow the suffering? Why does it go on? Why doesn't he heal all people? And the thing is, I think he does heal all people. Like the person that dies of cancer actually is healed. They're just not healed in the here and now. If they know Jesus, they are for all eternity immediately transformed into the ultimate wellness. So healing happens. Sometimes it happens the way that we want it to.
Mhm.
Rescue happens. Sometimes it happens the way that we want it to.
Mhm.
And other times it's that our soul escapes.
Mhm.
And when our soul escapes, we're set free from the bondage of our body. And so it's a big idea. It's a complex idea, but I don't think God is playing defense.
Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. If he is, then how is he sovereign? How is he creator if
Right.
he is just waiting to fix it? No, he allows the enemy, again, that's a whole nother deep discussion, Satan to do and cause trouble for a time. And eventually there will come an end. He will no longer, and Satan will be put down forever. But
Right.
again, there isn't just a heaven and a hell, and if you're good you go to heaven, and the hell you go to, if you're bad you go to hell. There is an enemy out to devour all of us.
Right.
And as we can look around the world and see how he is destroying lives, and broken people make broken people, right? And there,
Right.
as you've mentioned, there is so much suffering, so much heartache. But in walking with Jesus, when we step into that and accept his life, his forgiveness, his presence with us on a daily basis, he's with us through it, through the highs, through the lows, through the in-betweens. We aren't promised that it's all wiped away until he puts an end, and we're in heaven with him. But again, the other choice is we can just continue to live, find moments of happiness, fleeting happiness, and still suffer, because everyone suffers, whether you follow Christ or you don't.
Right.
But the difference is that there is no other love like his love.
Right.
There, there is no person, there is no group, there is no resource that can do what he does.
Right.
No one can meet you in that moment of excruciating suffering. No one can keep holding your hand and keep drawing you in as you go through seasons or years of suffering, except for him.
Right.
He can be in that moment, and he does use people. Yes, he does.
Mhm.
But it is his, because of his justice, because of his love. And again, his timeline of justice is different than ours. And I mentioned earlier, she didn't hear, and before, after, or I'm sorry, I mentioned earlier, and I want to mention again about um, another circumstance that many people have heard of, again, is with the concentration camps and the murders of the Jews, and the attempted annihilation of every one of the Jewish people
Mhm.
and anyone else that sided with them. And I think of people like Corrie ten Boom, um, who suffered
Mm.
for helping. Her family suffered greatly for standing up for other people, for caring
Right.
about other people, seeing them as valuable human beings, regardless of what was happening around them, and regardless of what was being said. And so she suffered with them. So again, another unfair, unjust suffering and shattering and destroying of her family.
Mm.
And yet how he met them over and over again in that camp, and how he was with her, but yet how he stretched her, how he grew her, how their relationship grew, how she gained such an understanding of who he is. And then her traveling around the world afterwards, after she
Mhm.
lost everyone in her
Right.
life, she knew who our God, who our creator was. She knew who Jesus was, just as you. And I guess today is really about inviting you listeners, to explore, to try to understand who this creator is, that even though there is much suffering, even though you may be hurting and suffering so much now, because we all go through it in varying degrees, and pain is pain, which I say all the time. Yes, Jenny Sue's nightmare is about as hellish as it can get. Those that have suffered in concentration camps are about as hellish as it can get. But that doesn't lessen your pain. Your pain is still horrible. Your pain is still pain. But our God will meet you. Our God will lead you. He will show you what he has ahead for you. He will show you his presence, his gentleness, his
Mm,
love, his kindness, his blessings.
mhm.
So maybe that would be my next question. So you have suffered greatly in this life because that's what the enemy has brought upon you. And God has led you and brought you to understanding who he is, and you have seen it and you believe it, and you have chosen to follow him and believe that he is our God, our creator, and present with us now and forever. But I believe you probably have a few stories of some beautiful blessings that again are gifts. Blessings and gifts are things that not that we've earned. Gifts are just because he loves us.
Mm.
Are there any of those little moments of these gifts that he's given that you haven't earned by how you live your life because of what you do and because you are such an obedient, good, faithful servant in fighting exploitation and human trafficking, but just because he loves you? Are there any of those gifts that you can think of? I mean, sometimes they're just little moments.
Yeah, I have like big answers and little answers. I think the big answer is that my life today is just full to the overflowing of glory and joy. Like I wake up happy, I go to sleep happy, I dream. I sometimes wake up and my face is tired from smiling in my sleep. My life is full of glory and joy. And that is because of the presence of Jesus redeeming every broken place. And in a season a couple of years ago, I was going through some really, really profound grief. And there's this verse in Psalm, I think it's 58, 56, that it makes reference to God will collect our tears in a bottle. And the next verse, David's talking about, you know, have you not have you not kept track of my tears? Are they not written in your scroll? Are you not collecting them in your bottle? Enemies come against me from every side. And the next verse says, but, I love the but this I know, God is for me. And so, despite everything that's happening, my deep, resonating hope is this gift of knowing that whatever I face day to day, this I know, God is for me. But I was meditating on this verse in that season a couple of years ago of just devastating grief. I mean, the kind of grief that day after day, the open mouth howling kind of grief. And meditating on that verse, and I was doing a Bible study with some of my closest girlfriends. And at the end, we were invited to this contemplative exercise that we were going to close our eyes and meditate on that verse, but Jesus was going to take us somewhere. He had a plan. He like had a picnic packed and he was ready to take us if we were willing to go. So I entered into this contemplative exercise and asked Jesus, where are we going? And we start hiking through these mountain meadows and come to this spectacular mountain lake. I mean, the water was cool and this aquamarine blue, almost glowing. It was so clear and so bright and surrounded by like giant snow-capped mountains all the way around. Like I could spin. There's a field of flowers. There's the mountains. There's this huge lake. You couldn't really even see the far side of the lake. And so I turned to Jesus and I'm like, so what's this place? And he goes, oh, this is your tears, baby. A bottle wasn't big enough. And it was this exquisite place of beauty in the midst of severe hard mountains and blooming and nourishment and clarity. And um, and that's a gift that I carry intimately. My husband and I went camping this last weekend, and we're way out in the mountains in Colorado, and come upon a mountain lake, and I'm like reminded of Jesus going, yeah, I, a bottle wasn't big enough. He's measured every tear, and every tear is carving out a place of beauty and redemption and freedom. And so I would say, easy answers: my kids, my husband, a marriage full of delight, my work. But really, the big answer is that I get to have this life of glory and joy and purpose because Jesus still now keeps showing up.
That's so beautiful. Thinking of, again, you could be. And so often we see people living in that victim mentality. I'm owed. I deserve. I've had it so rough. This has been hell, and hard to even see anything good. So to say that you're full of joy and full of his glory every day, that says a lot, because there are so many people that get stuck and just settle in that victim mentality and life.
Right.
And there is so much more. No matter what pain, no matter what suffering, there is so much more for you, even through the other pains you will endure the rest of your
Right.
life, and
Right.
through the beauty. There is so much little gifts of moments of his presence, pictures that he shows you, however he needs to speak to you, however he needs to show himself to you, because he doesn't always do it exactly the same for each of us, because we are a little different. He is so creative and made us all similar but different. And so
Right.
he relates to us and how we need to be related to.
Right.
And again, thank you for sharing that. Uh, I believe that that is the best answer ever. Really, because again, really, just comparing and thinking of what I've seen and who I've heard talk, it is just so easy and so natural for us to say, I'm owed.
Right.
I deserve better than this. Well, yes, you do. But I'm
Right.
sorry, the world isn't going to just decide to give you what you deserve. But God will give you more than you deserve.
Well, and do I mean, I have been rascally. I was there was a season I was
Rascally.
so mad at God, mad at men, mad
Mhm.
at humanity, just
Shocking.
mad.
Mhm.
And I have been through seasons that I was hard to love. I don't live perfectly. I don't love perfectly. What do I deserve? I certainly don't deserve the magnitude of grace and mercy that's poured out on me every day, except that He chose me. He
Mm.
chose you. He chose us to display his glory and his love. And
Mhm.
that victim mentality is so tricky. One of the things that's really been profound, and I use all the time in my work, there's something called the drama triangle. And as every triangle, there's 3 points. And in the drama triangle, there is a hero, and there's a victim, and there's a perpetrator.
Mhm.
And so, for any circumstance, you can look at this circumstance in through the lens of, am I the victim of this? um, for example, I'll make it black and white with a personal example. For example, recently we were back in southern Missouri, where the vast majority, really all of my trauma happened. And we were supposed to be going down to the lake with my husband's family. And my husband's family has a lake house very near the lake house where much of my trauma happened, like same neighborhood, You can walk past the property where so much of my devastation happened. So going to the lake, going back to Missouri anyway, is super hard for me. Going to the lake levels up how hard and triggery it is. So that morning, I'm like trying to armor up, prepare. We're going to have a fun day at the lake, right? And my father in law says to my husband, hey, I'll drive. Why don't you guys just ride with us? And my husband automatically says, sure, that'd be great. And I look across the room. It's so good that looks don't kill, because then I would be a widow. And I love my husband desperately. So praise God for that grace. I look across the room like, what the hell? Like, no. And he's completely oblivious. And I need everybody to know, anybody that listens to this, my father-in-law is this amazing, godly guy. I love my in-laws. But the thing is, going to the lake is really hard for me. And if I go to the lake in somebody else's car, I have no way of escape. And if I go to the lake in somebody else's car, I'm in the back seat being driven someplace that every cell of my being feels terror, associates with rape, right? So I'm being driven somewhere I don't want to go against my will with no hope of escape. So I'll tell you, rascally, all day long, I am stinking mad. I'm mad at my husband. I'm mad at my in-laws. I'm mad at the stinking lake. I hate it. I hate this place. In my mind, I cursed. Okay. Jesus knows this about me. I love Jesus. Sometimes I cuss a little. In my mind, I was cussing how much I hated this place. In the drama triangle, see, I was the victim. How dare my husband say that we would go in my father-in-law's? Why are we going to this place anyway? I'm being victimized, right? And I'm mad about it. So I'm praying, I'm cussing a little, I'm wrestling, and then in the wee dark hours of the night, still mad. Like I went to bed mad, like cold shoulder to my husband. I was mad. In the wee dark hours, the Holy Spirit goes, but wait, you're expecting your father-in-law to know automatically, or your husband to speak up, but you didn't speak up. If I don't speak up about what I need, why would they? Like, they don't know what I need. So in that situation, I became the perpetrator. Remember the drama triangle? There's a hero, a victim, and a perpetrator. And much of my healing, you'll find this with a lot of survivors, there were people that were complicit. They knew, but they didn't say anything. And that was certainly true of my trauma growing up. There were people that knew and didn't intervene. They kept silent. They kept the peace. And on that day going to the lake, I kept silent and I kept the peace to maintain the family picture. When if for 1 second I had leaned over to my husband and said, baby, I need to have my own car, he would say, absolutely, no problem. Or if I said to my father-in-law, you know what? I really need to have our own car there. My father would be like, absolutely. What else do you need? They would, both of these godly, amazing men, bend over backwards to meet the needs. But on that day, I was the perpetrator. I was complicit. I kept my mouth shut, as opposed to third alternative would have been to be the hero, would have been to recognize what I need and ask for what I need. And in any given situation, it can be illness, it can be budget, it can be marriage situation, we are interacting from one of those three places. Am I being victimized by this circumstance? Am I perpetuating the abuse or the trauma? Or am I making the sometimes really brutally hard, heroic choice to move forward with purpose and impact? And so that's what keeps me, like, I don't do it perfectly. I was stomping mad all stinking day long. My
Well,
poor husband.
yes. Well, all of it is very understandable. I'm sure we can all relate to the time when we get really pissed off because someone isn't understanding what's going on in our head. But
Right,
again, we are silent. I mean, I'm sure all of us do this. And,
right,
and yet, again, and then you ruined your day, might have been okay if you
right.
would have said something. But again, it ruined your day and you get to blame yourself and
I was,
and your past, but again it's really yourself, as you said. um and we all can play that victim mentality mode in simple things like this, big
right,
triggers or not.
right,
We can rationalize, whatever, justify our feelings, but if we don't
right,
communicate, again,
right,
when you're a kid, just referencing past things that you obviously cannot be held responsible to speaking up as a child,
right,
but
right.
obviously we're not talking about that. But anyhow, thank you for that analogy, and I believe a lot of us can connect and understand, and we have choices. We do suffer, we do hurt, things are unfair, unjust all of the time. I swear, I think more and more I am like, I don't think anything in life is fair ever. I mean, the
No,
more I see it, I'm like, there isn't. I mean, where do we get this idea of fair?
right,
Because I think I never see it. There
right,
is blessing and there is pain, but there is nothing really. There's surviving, but I do not see fair.
right.
Um, but anyhow, but I am thankful that God is not fair.
Yeah.
Fair for his grace, fair for his mercy, because yes, I have suffered, you have suffered, we all suffer unjustly.
Hmm.
And sometimes I should have suffered for other things that I have done, for my big mouth,
Right,
for my
right.
bad attitude, for the hate, the anger,
Yeah.
my foolishness. I deserve a lot worse. And
Hmm.
yet he continues to be patient with me as I learn, as I hopefully learn quicker from mistakes and see and understand. So I'm thankful. Well,
Right.
thank you so much, Jenny Sue. Again, please check out the podcast notes if you want to dig in more and get a hold of God's sovereignty, his mercy, and his grace, and read her book, The Lucky One, and hear about who she is today and how God has led her through all of that. And he has that for you. God has that for you, no matter what you've endured, no matter where you have been, no matter where you are right now, what stupid things you're doing, or what's being done to you. It does not matter. Call out to him.
Mm.
Get yourself a Bible. Reach out to me. I'll get you one. I'll get you resources. He is here for you. He is here in now, not just when we get to heaven. It is in this moment, walking with us through every circumstance, and to have joy in any
Mm.
circumstance. Yes, it's crazy. We can have that anger that Jenny Sue's talking about, but also still have joy in the middle of that. It's crazy. But
Right.
with God, you can, because he shows
Hmm.
up and he meets you and connects with you like no other. So thank you
Hmm.
again, Jenny Sue. I so appreciate you. I appreciate who you are and how you shine, and you are a splendor, a joy to know and to see. And I just thank you and I thank God for you and for all the other beautiful lives that I see his work in, his redemption, his beauty, his glory shining through other people's lives like yours. That was my dog. He came to say goodbye too. So, okay.